Morning, and I want to welcome everyone to our now our second MASDA Monday, and thanks for joining us. Of course, as I said last week, I would have loved nothing more than to have hosted all of you in Iowa to be able to show you around and introduce you to some of our great folks. But we're going to get a chance to do that remotely today. Today we're talking renewable fuels, something that's very important to us as a state. So you're going to get a chance to hear from that. We'll have a couple of our sponsors, two individuals representing companies that are very well known to all of you. And so we'll hear from them. And I just wanted a little housekeeping here. So again, everyone's muted so we can hear. To ask a question, submit by clicking the question and answer button on the bottom side of the screen. And the chat feature is also available if you're having any technical issues. Go ahead and put that in there. And the meeting is also being recorded so that it's available for replay. So just let us know if you're having any troubles, and certainly if you've got questions that you want to ask, please take advantage of that. Again, the Q&A button or the chat, their feature at the bottom of the screen. So again, we're gonna kick off and look at renewable fuels. But before we do that, I want to ask one of our great sponsors. And again, I just can't thank our sponsors enough. Every one of these sponsors that agreed to come on, and again, you're going to hear from a couple. And then you're going to hear from folks on the panel that were also all sponsors. When we gave them the option of getting a refund, every one of them said, no, we want to continue to support MASDA. And we certainly appreciate that continued financial support. So without further ado, I want to introduce and ask Mr. Dave Flackney, representing Syngenta. Dave, please address the group. Thanks again for your great support. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I wanted to thank all of your team for pulling this together. You know, the last 4 months, which was supposed to be 2 to 3 weeks to bend the curve, has been a really challenging time for, I think, all of us. And I can't tell you how much everyone in agriculture has benefited from the flexibility and rapid response of our state departments of agriculture. So I want to give kudos to all of you and your teams. You know, basically from every angle, the Department of Ags have facilitated and supported the supply chain. You know, whether it's the inputs that Syngenta supplies through the channel down to the farmer, or whether it's from the farm gate through the processing to the consumer to make sure that we kept the grocery store shelves full. You guys have really gone above and beyond, and you know, we're all blessed to be part of an essential industry, right? But to have the dedicated staff and the dedicated people to carry out what we've had to carry out in these last few months has been incredible. So I just was going to say a couple of words. You know, our company's goal along this whole path has been to protect the health and safety of our employees and our customers, but to make sure that our customers had what they needed to get this year's crop in. And I've been really proud to watch that happen and witness the pride all these other companies have had along the way as well. So it's been a very positive experience. I think none of us asked for this, right? Since MASDA makes up most of the Corn Belt, I was just going to make one other quick comment. And that is just around the corner is detasseling time, and I wanted you to all know that we've communicated with many of your staffs, but we've put in place really robust protocols to ensure social distancing throughout that process and to keep all of those folks that carry those things out safe as well. And in Iowa this year, we're kicking off a really interesting thing that may come to a number of the states. It's a pilot program through FieldWatch, where we have a on the web real-time mapping of seed field workers to ensure that we protect them and that there's not any drift incidences and things like that that can happen. So there's a lot of exciting things going on from a safety, health and safety standpoint and a stewardship standpoint. And I just can't tell you how much we appreciate the partnership with your departments to carry that all off. So thanks again, and if there's anything Syngenta can do, we stand ready to help you in any way we can.
Thanks, Dave, and I'm glad you mentioned that pilot project on the safety of workers in those seed fields, and we're we're really excited about that and anxious to see how it plays out. And we just appreciate all the partners from Field Watch and all the companies that are involved. And yes, we do hope that that's something that can be useful in some other places. So thanks, Dave. Thank you, Syngenta. Appreciate your support. All right, so let's get in here to talking about our renewable fuels, and we've got three of our industry representatives, great partners with us today. I thought I might set the stage here just a little bit about this topic, and so we've got a few slides here we'll walk through, but you know, I know that you all know Iowa's a leader in ethanol and biodiesel production, but of course we all know that across the Midwest, this is an important industry. And you know, this is truly one of those where we like to talk about win-win situations. This is truly a win-win situation when you really look at it from the standpoint of it's important from the standpoint that we have a market for our farmers, whether it's corn or soybeans or what have you, that they have a demand for their product. It's win for our economy because, of course, there's jobs that are created and those plants deliver tremendous economic value back to their communities and their owners. It's good for consumers because, of course, we know that when you pull up to the pump and you've got a higher blend of ethanol that's a lower price, that's good for your pocketbook. And ultimately, too, it's good for the environment in that we have cleaner burning fuels, better for air quality, and many facets from an environmental standpoint, too. So not very many times do we get to say that something is win-win-win-win, but we do in this case. Of course, very relevant, too. We'd be talking about this anyway because of how important it is to our economy and to consumers. But when you look at what's happened with this renewable fuels industry over the last couple of months, it's very relevant to have this conversation with these industry representatives. The number that you're seeing on the screen there, down 17%. Of course, that's on an annualized basis. We've seen dramatic reduction in transportation fuel demand, you know, from March through into May and June, and starting to come back as folks begin to travel and we start to reopen things. But you'll hear about that impact, that perspective from our panelists today. And the industry's overall capacity is something around 16 billion gallons, and it's currently estimating that the industry will produce 12.8 billion gallons this year. So, you know, dramatic market disruption that folks are going to have to work through. So what are some things that states can do? And again, I'll be asking our panelists this, but you know, when we look at how can we continue to support this industry, of course, there's a lot of things that happen at the federal level, and we must always be looking at federal renewable fuels policy. Right now, we've got some waivers that have been requested by EPA. We understand that they have to take those and consider those, but I think I have a very direct suggestion for what can be done with those waivers. It involves throwing them right into the trash can. This is clearly somebody trying to work around, companies trying to work around 10th Circuit Court decision that indicated was headed in the right direction in terms of small refinery exemptions. And yet again, we see the oil industry trying to get around that. So some things that we're doing in the state of Iowa, we're focused on expanding infrastructure for higher blends of ethanol and biodiesel. You know, I'm a big believer in when given the choice, when consumers see those options at the pump, they're going to tend to choose those higher blends. TJ will talk about that consumer-facing piece of this in just a little bit. But we have a renewable fuel infrastructure program here in the state of Iowa. Over the last, you know, now dozen years, we've invested $36 million. That should say $36 million in investment cost share for fuel marketers to put in the tanks and pumps and hoses and all the types of things that a fuel marketer needs to offer higher blends of ethanol and biodiesel. And we've got results to show for it. A lot of E85 blender pumps out across the state. We've got E15 infrastructure that's now going in, and there's more that we want to do. Biodiesel dispensers and biodiesel terminals all across the state of Iowa as well. So this is something that we've invested in as a state and will continue to invest in, you know, in the coming months and years as well. And then again, just the big numbers. Iowa does lead the nation in ethanol and biodiesel production with over 4 billion gallons of ethanol and over 350 million gallons of biodiesel. So we also are very interested in other ways that we can support this industry through tax policy and really any way that we can. And so we'll be hearing a little more about that from our participants. I think we'll go ahead and just jump in here, and I'll introduce our panelists. Oh, do we have Dave? You know what? We'll take one pause here. We got Dave Tierney. I want to give one more opportunity here for one of our sponsors to address the group. We've got, again, somebody who's very well known to us, Dave Tierney from Bayer. Dave, if you're on, go ahead and address the group.
Secretary, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Very, very good. Very good. Well, hey, just want to say, Mike, to you and everybody, it's been quite a spring, like they always are, right? But certainly COVID-19 has thrown a few more wrinkles at us. And I just want to say on behalf of the entire Bayer team, how much we always appreciate all the work that we all do together to get this crop in and get it sprayed and get it free of weeds and get it growing. And this year, again, has been, an amazing spring with the challenges thrown to farmers across the Midwest and across the entire U.S. And it's this cooperation that the industry has with departments of ag that make the difference, and that, our customers and farmers and retailers could just go about their business as best they could in a safe manner and be effective. And we're just thrilled to be part of it and happy to help. June has had a few things too, thrown at us on top of COVID-19, and we've continued to work through all of those things so farmers continue to have all the tools that they had last week and they have this week. I think you know what I mean. And appreciated Dave Flackney also talking about the new pilot program here in Iowa in conjunction with aerial applicators and the Iowa Seed Trade Association. We're excited about that pilot as decastling season will be upon us soon. But thanks again for all the partnership and support.
Thanks again, Dave. Thanks to Bayer. Thanks to you for your participation, and we really appreciate you joining us and the great partnership that we have with you. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into our. I know want to leave as much time as we can here for our panel. And again, if you've got questions or thoughts that you'd like to share, use that Q&A button and the chat button. If you have questions for the group, we'll try to leave some time here at the end. I want to introduce our participants here. First, we have TJ Page, and TJ is Market Development Manager at Iowa Corn. Next, we have Gary Hare with Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Renewable Energy Group, REG, based in Ames. And then we have Doug Bervin joining us. Doug is Vice President of Corporate Affairs for POET. Again, each of these folks were sponsors of the meeting. We appreciate that. But from an Iowa perspective, these folks have a tremendous footprint, well, all across the country. But these companies have a significant presence in the state of Iowa. They're significant employers, and they're significant customers of the grain that the products that our farmers produce. And so we appreciate that first and foremost. And let's jump in here. So Doug, I want to start with you. We talked a little bit about what's happened with COVID-19 and the response, but give us a sense. Certainly the business has changed because of that, or you've dealt with some things, but there were issues before COVID-19. Kind of tell us what challenges were facing your business even before the pandemic.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you, Secretary Nag, and everybody for allowing us some time here. I think this is a great forum. We have had a lot of challenges over the years. The ethanol industry really hasn't grown much since 2013. And since that time, we've seen farmer incomes drop by 50%. We've seen small refinery exemptions take away about 4 billion gallons worth of demand. I mean, that demand destruction, 4 billion gallons of ethanol means about 1.3 billion bushels of corn. Imagine what that can mean for the state of Iowa for supporting grain prices. We've seen a number of EPA hurdles. Some we've overcome, some we haven't. We just continue to work on that. And then, right before, maybe during COVID, we saw the Russia-Saudi production war. on oil. And I think it really gave us a really good glimpse on a couple of things that we don't think about much. Number one is our dependence on foreign oil. This country is not energy independent. And we're not energy independent because we are not the low-cost producer of oil in the world. It's just that simple. Average cost of producing oil in this country is somewhere around $36 a barrel, where Saudi Arabia and some of the OPEC countries can get oil out of the ground for less than $10 a barrel. Unless we compete on price, we are not energy independent. And ethanol right now does compete with gas. It does relieve our pressure. It is, like you said, Mike, everything that's good for the farmer, the consumer, the environment, the economy, and our national security. We forget that national security piece sometimes. It's critical for our national security when we spend 30% of our defense budget on national security, on protecting our pathway for oil. We have a national security interest. We need to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. So we've seen all kinds of issues. That foreign oil pressure reduced the price of oil dramatically. It reduced the price of ethanol dramatically, obviously. And it was obviously really, really tough on us before COVID. And then the other thing, I'll leave it with this. The other thing that this has shown us is that our dependence on foreign countries to buy our grains and our ag products is also dangerous for us. When we can grow the biofuel industry in this country and soak up the surplus grain so that we don't have these downward price pressures and we don't have ag problems like we see today, why don't we grow our domestic demand for grains through increased biofuel use? Then we don't need these foreign countries nearly as much to purchase our ag products. So no growth, SRE, EPA hurdles, we've just got all kinds of issues. I'll leave it with this. We have an issue with taking market share from the most powerful political force on the planet. Mm-hmm. It's oil. It doesn't matter how good we are, how much common sense we have about increasing ethanol. We are taking market share from a very powerful force that doesn't want to lose market share. And so we, as an ag industry, as states, as partners, need to band together to make our case and do what's right for this country.
Well put, Doug, and thanks. And when you put a number like 1.3 billion bushels of corn on the table, that's a big number. And especially when we're looking at a carryout that just continues to grow, and a good crop in the ground in a lot of places, from a larger macroeconomic standpoint, that's a number that should have us all concerned. Gary, let's go to you and REG. Look a little closer at the COVID-19, the pandemic itself, and how's the pandemic impacted the economics of the biodiesel industry?
Yeah, so thank you, Secretary Nag. And, I would echo many of the comments that Doug expressed around, challenges that we had before the pandemic. But certainly after the pandemic was in our face, so to speak, it has created certain demand uncertainty for diesel fuel in the marketplace. There's a great amount of value destruction. Doug referenced, the impact of OPEC and the decline of crude oil, petroleum, and what that meant to gasoline and diesel values around the country, and how that impacts both ethanol and biodiesel. We saw, just in general terms, about a 10 to 20% reduction in diesel consumption, and of course that impacts us and our production facilities. It affected certainly the ethanol industry much greater. We buy distillers corn oil from the ethanol industry, so it restricted a feedstock that we use for production of biodiesel. And the bigger thing was, I think, beyond just our own production economics, but the value destruction for agriculture. About our industry production capacity, give or take 2.8 to 3 billion gallons a year. About half of that feedstock comes from soybean oil. The balance of it comes from distillers corn oil or used cooking oil or animal fats, whether it be beef, pork, or poultry. And, the value that they get when we're utilizing those lower value parts of that production system, being animal fats or being corn oil that gets extracted from DDGs, from the ethanol industry, that added value and that destruction there has a huge impact on agriculture, which gets felt. We were fortunate because the initial surge of the COVID-19 and the pandemic meant that the supply chain needed to be filled for goods and services. So that helped stabilize diesel demand. But once the supply chain was, then we started seeing the decline in demand overall in the industry. And so now we're starting to come back and we're starting to see demand come along. Of course, agriculture with planting season going on, that helped with diesel demand and biodiesel consumption as well. So it was good to see that come in and help offset some of that transportation destruction, but it was certainly felt by our industry.
Thanks, Gary. And, I think I'm glad you mentioned that interconnectivity between the different sectors, right? And whether it was CO2 availability coming out of renewable fuel plants for packing plants, or whether it's that animal fat coming out of a packing plant. I think I heard a lot of folks on both sides of that equation talking about how, wow, we really need each other, and in ways that maybe I hadn't heard people advocating for each other in the past. I think that's one of those things that we definitely had a chance to see and realize in new ways.
That's certainly true.
All right, let's go. Let's shift gears just a little bit. So that helped us get a sense of what's happened and what was happening. TJ, I want to start talking a little more about that consumer-facing piece of this. Iowa Corn and the industry has done a lot of work into this, and talk about that marketplace. And what do you see as some of the biggest challenges from a marketing standpoint for renewable fuels? And then also, what are the biggest opportunities? What could we be working on? What could we be focusing on to expand demand out there?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Secretary Nag. I'd certainly, first point at, a lot what has already been discussed. COVID has brought on obviously an immense amount of challenges for the industry and stress on the supply chain. From more of a marketing perspective, by all means, severely depressed demand for fuel products out there, but it has really allowed us to kind of look at opportunities in this space, especially as it relates to human health and the fuels we choose. I think it was Harvard University put out a study that was highlighted in New York Times and several other places around particulate matter exposure, extended exposure to, the particulate matter coming off of fuel usage, and how that can really have some serious respiratory impacts, not only on lung health, but also they linked it to higher exposure to more particulate matter, linked to higher rates of COVID transaction and positive testing. What we've really been able to do is, work with our partners in this space to shine a light on, ethanol and renewable fuels' ability to really limit that exposure for yourself, for your family. Some of the things that we focus on, even usually just 10% ethanol, so that option that is chosen by more than 95 consumers across the nation today, which is a 10% ethanol, or E10 is what we call it in the fuels world. It's usually that 87 button. And that option, it lowers particulate matter closer to like 7 to 10 times to what is in a typical gallon of gasoline that does include ethanol. That's because we're replacing a lot of those dirtier octane enhancement products. So that's one specifically with COVID that has been impacted. I'd say, as we look out into the future and what we're experiencing, and what we would experience in times of normalcy, there's been a great amount of work in the area of market research and consumer perceptions on renewable fuel products. So a lot done actually by Poet and Growth Energy. They've done a fantastic look into, the consumer mindset on fuels. A few things that they've really settled on is one, a tagline that they think really extends itself well to E15, or that 15% ethanol blend, which is engine smart and earth kind. That right away messages that fuel as not only smart for your engine, but kind to the earth. And those are two things that, if you think about a consumer walking up to a fuel pump, I'd personally say in our interactions, number one, economics is always kind of top of mind. Making sure you're purchasing a fuel that makes sense for your budget. But then secondly comes in engine safety and what am I doing to the environment. So engine safety, if you're thinking on a bigger scale, your house and then your car are kind of your two major purchases in your life, and your car is what gets you to and from work to be able to get that paycheck. So, really leading off with some good engine smart messaging, or, around safety for your vehicle. And then also that environmental message. So earth kind, we reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 43% compared to regular gasoline and ethanol. So, and for biodiesel, it's even further. So those earth friendly messaging is really what resonates with consumers and allows us, to kind of have somewhat of a on second thought. We don't think about the fuels we purchase a ton, but when we think about it on second thought, there's actually a right choice I could be making at the pump, and there's reasons for each one. And that cleaner burning ethanol blend or that biodiesel blend is usually there, not only there because it's a great economic driver, but it's there for a reason, and that's because it's good for the human and planet health. So those are some serious, opportunities and pathways through messaging that we're seeing really resonate today in the fuel space.
Thanks, TJ. And again, I would encourage you use that Q&A button. TJ's got a lot more. He's got a lot more detail, and there's a good amount of information here if you want to dig into that just a little bit better. But let me just say this: I'm glad that professionals get involved in marketing, because Earth Smart and Engine Kind, pretty good stuff. I've been joking that I need to stand maybe one day a week at an E15 pump and just say, "Yes, you can. Yes, you can use that. Yes, you can use that."
Absolutely.
I always say I'm the guy that sticks my head around the fuel pump to somebody and says, "You sure can put that in that car. It's the right year and all that." So maybe we just need more people saying, "Yes, you can" out there. Well, thanks, TJ. Doug, we know that, and you mentioned it. You kind of went into it a bit, but the whole the idea that we've got a lot of policy components to supporting a renewable fuels industry. When you look at our competitor is who they are, and that there are some policy pieces that we need to get right. Certainly the renewable fuels standard is something that we talk a lot about. Small refinery exemptions, year-round access to E15. We've got now a federal biofuel infrastructure program that we're able to really get some infrastructure out there, provide more choice at the pump. More consumer options. Those are all great things. But at the state level, you've got operations in many of the states represented on this call. You got departments of ag across the Midwest on this call. What role can states play in supporting the growth of renewable fuels?
Sure. Well, the obvious answer is higher blends. Like you said, Secretary, E15 should be much more prevalent around the country, and it should be encouraged in the states. I know Iowa is doing that. Other states should, because it's just good for their states in every way. I'm not a huge mandate fan, but I'd love to see E15 become the minimum base level ethanol in these states. There is absolutely no reason why we can't do that. And if we did, if some states started leading the way using E15 as the base blend rather than E15. I mean, E15, going from E10 to E15, represents 2 billion bushels of corn in this country, 2 billion bushels. We're going to have a 3.3 billion bushel carryout of corn. We need to do something to soak up this surplus grain. And the only market that can grow fast enough to keep up with ever increasing yields, you heard from Dave and Dave earlier, both are putting out tremendous new technology, The only thing that can keep up with an ever increasing yield is renewable fuels. Population isn't growing that fast. Export aren't growing that fast. We need to increase domestic fuels to soak up that surplus grain and make biofuel, make agriculture strong again. And you know, one of the things that I've been saying recently is this: biofuels are the catalyst for successful agriculture, and successful agriculture is the key to solving some of the world's most critical issues: climate change, poverty, hunger, disease. How do we expect to address all of these issues when agriculture can't even break even, right? It's a really troubling thing. There has to be a margin in agriculture to be able to invest in the technologies that allow us to meet our potential, right? It's really important. And subsidies, I've been talking to a number of farmers recently, and just about every one of them will say, look, we'll cash a subsidy check to keep our farm going, but we need markets to assure us of a future. Subsidies are a short-term Band-Aid for a major injury, right? We need markets, and the only markets that can grow fast enough are the renewable fuels markets. And I can't express enough the ripple effect of demand destruction of biofuels to agriculture. Not only is it local, it's local taxes, it's the local diner, it's the local farmer, but it's national, and the ripple effect is global, because if we're shipping our cheap grain all around the world, we stifle global agriculture. And if we're stifling global agriculture, that's as dangerous for the world as our dependence on foreign oil. Biofuels are the catalyst for successful ag. Successful ag is the key to solving climate change, poverty, hunger, disease. Starts with the states. States need to recommend higher blends, however they encourage that. That would be great.
Thanks, Doug. Well put. Higher blends. Gary, what from REG's perspective, from a biodiesel standpoint, how do we support this business? How do we increase demand?
Yeah, there's a number of ways of doing it, Secretary Nag, and I, you know, when you referenced speaking in front of the E15 pumps, I want you to come to Ames and visit the city of Ames. They have snow plows that have been added technology that allows them to use B100 year round. So those are things that I think move us forward and move us forward together to advance the benefits. The driving force for the city of Ames, as an example, was to be able to use fuels that were more sustainable. And, you know, we see that over and over again with private industry, where they are looking for access to low carbon or more sustainable renewable fuels. Agriculture, I think, has a problem, and I think petroleum industry has the same problem. If passengers and transportation fleets start transitioning over to electric vehicles, that's a problem for both industries, in my opinion. And the sooner that we can both understand that and work together, I think that can help us move forward. The programs that help advance low carbon fuels, California, Oregon have got successful programs. I would like to see something like that generated in the Midwest, and where it gives some value back to the farmer for his production practices, whether he's using no-till, whether he's using cover crops. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for agriculture to start embracing cover crops as maybe an oil seed opportunity between corn and soybean production that can create more value and, again, create more feedstock for us to advance biodiesel and renewable fuels in the country. State and federal programs are extremely important. Iowa has a number of programs, whether it's the retail incentive program for biodiesel blends, or whether it's production incentive. Illinois has a similar program. Minnesota has a mandate that encourages the blending of higher concentrations of biodiesel on a seasonal basis. I think that those are all examples of what we can do together to go forward. And I think that the other challenge that we had, and you asked about challenges, and TJ did a very good job of answering that. But when we think about agriculture and how the public perceives agriculture today, and that perception has been formed by industries that are not agriculture aligned. In other words, so there are misperceptions about how agriculture does animal care, how we produce, what it takes to produce a corn crop, the water usage. There are many misrepresentations, I think, that have been placed on agriculture that need to be addressed. And that's a continual education process that I think that renewable fuels has to take on, but agriculture has to take on to inform and educate the public about what is reality in agriculture today around renewable fuel production and around agricultural production in this country.
Well put, Gary. And by the way, I'm so glad you brought up the B100. I mean, talk about some misperceptions, right? These trucks are going out in the worst conditions on the coldest days when we're all trying to get home and hunker down, right? And that's been a tremendous showcase of what what technology can do and what this product can do. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. I would really encourage folks. Ames, Iowa, home of Iowa State University, home of REG. A great example of what can be done with B100s. Thank you for bringing that up. And by the way, you heard Doug and Gary both mention sustainability, carbon, climate, to the extent that it kind of feels like, I think several of us have talked about this, that almost irregardless of what, who's in the White House or who controls Congress next term, we likely have some sort of climate legislation or carbon related legislation as we think about a farm bill coming up. To what extent is carbon involved in sustainability, and renewables is such a key piece of that and a solution, and I'm glad you both mentioned it. How do we capture some of that value? Well, we need to capture value all the way through the supply chain, but certainly for our farmers, they need to capture a piece of that value as well. All right, so heads up, if you've got a question, get it in here. I'm gonna go going to ask all three to answer the similar question here at the end, and then we'll have time to hear from you all. So and Gary, you kind of went here, right? How do we talk to? We've got perceptions about us being formed by others outside of agriculture. Maybe this is a way that you can talk a little bit more about that. But I want to ask each of you, and I'm going to start with TJ, then go to Doug, and end with Gary. What are some of the partnerships that have been beneficial to the renewable fuels industry, and what might we look to do in the future in terms of partnerships to help maybe accomplish some of the things, the challenges that y'all have identified? So we'll go TJ, Doug, and then Gary.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's honestly a fantastic question, and be a huge topic of conversation right now in the fuel space. As far as ethanol and Iowa corn, one of our biggest partners and supporters has been the American Lung Association. They have been right there with us every step of the way, especially as it related to E85 and now this new wave from behind E15. In exactly what we were talking about earlier, is really just limiting your and your family's exposure to harmful particulate emissions that come out the tailpipe. American Lung Association has been a fantastic partner, and today we work on things with them, everything from what you were describing, Secretary Neg, of standing at pumps and educating consumers, to driver's ed programs. We work right now to produce not only pamphlets, materials, presentations, short little videos that instructors can play, really just putting tools and resources in front of driver's ed program associates that can then go use, that actually are a lot from the voice of the American Lung Association, talking about the merits of choosing each different blend of fuel out there, and what you should be considering when you're choosing those fuels. So they've been fantastic. A couple others that I'll mention, and I don't want to steal Doug's thunder, but these guys at Under the Hood have been amazing, and I'm sure Doug will mention them, but some really can, talk about it much more from that mechanic or car mindset perspective. Guys that have literally decades of experience in repairing, retooling vehicles, and can have host, nationally syndicated to talk show and answer questions from consumers. A new one that honestly is an interesting one to think through is not only our work with environmental groups that can carry environmental message, but also a new kind of a subset of this group that are somewhat of that environmental justice group that want, fair and equal treatment of all environmental policy, no matter what, social economic status you come from. These guys have actually been extremely friendly to ethanol and its ability to really reduce greenhouse gas emissions for literally every person of all walk of life if you're driving a gasoline vehicle. So it's really, trying to look at things in new ways, trying to look at new avenues and different target markets. But that's a few that have been, really stalwart partners, and I could continue to see, moving forward.
Thanks, TJ. Doug?
Sure. Well, I think TJ said it well with a number of different groups. I will add a couple. Number one, first and foremost, agriculture as a big tent needs to be behind this. In Iowa, South Dakota, Minnesota, sometimes we think about agriculture as being corn and soybeans and maybe some livestock, but farming goes well beyond just the Midwest and the Corn Belt. Agriculture in general has to be on board with successful agriculture. So we are trying to bring everybody under the big tent of agriculture to be more and more supportive, more and more knowledgeable, because not everybody does know, even in the ag space, the benefits of biofuels and the Midwest to global agriculture. That's important. Biotech sector. You just had Syngenta and Bayer on. They're in the biotech world, and sometimes the biotech world is a little bit on the fringe from biofuels sector. We need to get them engaged in what we're doing, and I'm not suggesting that they're not. They're just such a huge part. Biotech is a really, really large, well thought of industry, and they can help a lot with our messaging as we can help them with theirs. The autos are a very important group to partner with. We need the auto companies to start talking publicly about the benefits of higher blends of ethanol. Higher blends mean higher octane at a lower cost. You're getting a premium fuel for a less cost. We need the autos to be very upfront about that. We hear a lot about electric vehicles, when they're going to come, and biofuels being a bridge. And I like to say, if biofuels are a bridge, you can't see land on the other side of that bridge at this point. Biofuels will be around for a long time, as long as the internal combustion engine is. We need better fuels. The autos need to ask for it. TJ mentioned the health industry. We're much better for the health industry. We need to engage with them. The environmental community, we need to get facts to the environmental community so they're comfortable in talking about all of our benefits. Performance leagues like NASCAR, Indy, that sort of thing. And then we need to be educating the young folks in the mechanic world. We support a group called Universal Technical Institute. It's kind of the Harvard of mechanic schools. They go through a full year program of learning everything about an engine. They don't have anything in the fuel sector. Fuels are the most important part, I would argue, to running an engine. We need to make sure that they're very up to speed on ethanol, biodiesel, because if your mechanic tells you that ethanol is causing a problem in your engine, the consumer is going to believe that. I've had that happen to me. And it's really, really frustrating, blaming ethanol for something that ethanol has nothing to do with. In fact, fuels don't have anything to do with it. We've got to change the mindset. We've got to fix the doubt that's been cast in the mind of the American consumer to ask for ethanol for all the things that it's wanted. under the hood has been great. And then the last groups that we need to work with, one of the beauties of renewable fuels is not a Republican Democrat issue. It's a fact issue. We need to get the facts into the different groups. We have something for everybody in politics, absolutely everybody. There isn't a politician in this country that shouldn't embrace ethanol for their belief system, their politics, whatever it might be. And we need to feed those groups because it's going to take a lot. It's going to take all these groups to get us to be able to compete with the oil industry over market share.
Amen, Doug. This is not a partisan issue, and we have good facts. We have really good facts in this industry. It's about getting them to the right places. Gary.
Yes, thank you. You know, the Soybean Association has been a huge advocate for the biodiesel industry, and you know, as I was initially drawn to the biodiesel industry because of the value-added aspects that it provided for agriculture. As we went through, and I think Doug referenced this, you know, the need to reduce our dependency on foreign oil. That was one of the drivers for the biodiesel industry and for the ethanol industry early on. And now we see an inflection point where it's more about what about our climate benefits? And so being able to reach those groups and being able to communicate and advocate for our fuels and our industry's role in that transition. And you know, it's going to play an important role in my opinion. Having grown up on a Midwest farm, the renewable fuels program has been the best thing that I've ever seen for agriculture in my lifetime, and the value that it created for agriculture. So you don't want to turn away from that, and we've got to continue to work with groups that will expand and advance that opportunity for agriculture, because I think we can still see more, and we can still contribute more to agriculture, both at, you know, in the Midwest but around the world. State and federal governments have been very helpful through infrastructure programs that have been referenced earlier in helping us give that consumer the choice. And we've got to be able to provide that consumer the choice. And unfortunately, you know, it's been referenced, the petroleum industry and their reluctance to give up market share without policy to help the renewable fuels be included in the supply chain and in the public offering of fuels. They're not going to just give that to us. And we do, both ethanol and biodiesel, make petroleum fuel better. And we've got to talk about that. We've got to communicate that. We've got a lot of challenges with engine manufacturers and with mechanics, both local, and we've got to continue to help educate and inform the public and let them know what the real attributes are of the fuel offerings that they have. But a lot of groups, TJ referenced the American Lung Association, they've been very helpful. But we've got to continue to find ways to connect to those groups and advance things, in my opinion.
Very good, Gary. Hey, we've got a couple questions here. Let's go. Barb Glenn had a question here, and any of you can take it. What are you doing with the next generation youth to educate? What are you doing with the next generation the youth to educate, to advance understanding? Her local tech school has both biotech and HVAC programs as the most popular curricula. You know, I think a couple of you mentioned that, and just how do you speak to that next generation? I was just thinking here, we've gone from car talk to TikTok, maybe. TJ, maybe you need to be doing some more TikTok videos. Car talk was pretty popular, but that's for old people, I guess.
Yeah, my nieces and nephews tease me all the time that I need to get on TikTok. I haven't quite made that jump yet, but
well, there you go. This may be your entree.
Yeah, just a couple things that we do at Iowa Corn. I mentioned the driver's ed program, where we really, you know, put tools and resources in front of driver's ed teachers, and obviously volunteer ourselves and our time to be able to go out and speak with these students. I I probably speak at about 7 to 10 a year, just different driver's ed programs all around the state. And then also we have what we call the Biofuels Mobile Education Center. It's a kind of about a 50-foot trailer that's very interactive. You walk in and you learn about all things biofuels as you move through it. That's something that we send around to events all over the place, including little school field days and things like that, to really just start the topic of conversation when it comes to renewable fuels. Obviously, it's not until they're driving where they really can impact their fuel choices and really start interacting with the fuels. But it is a way to start introducing those concepts. And then obviously, a big one that Growth Energy and Iowa Corn used to participate in was big between NASCAR, Indy Series. Other ways in which you're seeing the product utilized and being able to get that, one-to-many conversation. We use things like we have an in-state rivalry between the University of Iowa and Iowa State University. We use that as the Iowa Corn Cyhawk series, and are able to interact with consumers not only on game day, but leading up to it as well. So, trying to find different ways in getting in front of those younger consumers and, using all avenues and tools to put that in front of teachers and provide those resources.
Very good.
And I would add to that a little bit what we're doing. We've got a number of different programs that we're working on. One is we have what's called a Never Satisfied Scholarship. We give $5,000 scholarships to 10 kids in college, and we get literally thousands of applications for this. People go to the website, they look at what we do. It really helps them get educated because they need to make an educated paper on why they're never satisfied about biofuels, improving the world, that sort of thing. We're a huge supporter of FFA. Thousands and thousands of kids in FFA. Great platform for them to learn more about what we do. We put together a biofuel curriculum for high school students. So all of the ag schools that teach an ag program can download a biofuel curriculum that gives them everything that we've talked about today and much, much more. Great program. And then from mechanic schools and all kinds of science fairs and things like that, we're trying to educate the younger generation because they're the ones that are really motivated to clean the air, clean the water, help the environment, human health. All those things are really important. We think it's important to reach young people and get them on the right foot right out of the beginning.
Well, I know we've got one Q&A here that and Tracy Bruckner, you've asked a question I think could be a topic for discussion for some time, and so we won't be able to do it justice here, but I will read it. How do we move crop systems that feed into ethanol to be more truly renewable? All the nitrogen fertilizer and pesticides seem to be a tough argument to say it's environmentally friendly. How does public policy shift to ensure we have more cover crops and integrated systems to reduce input applications? Well, I mean, in your question, even saying it seems to be a tough argument. Look, there's no doubt that there's things that can be done to improve our sustainability in agriculture broadly and all throughout the supply chain and resiliency and sustainability. Using data to drive decisions. And I think we actually have a really good story to tell about improving from a sustainability standpoint all across the board. So not to say that we're have accomplished everything we want to in that, but I think that actually is part of what I think Doug and Gary both referred to as we've got good facts here in this industry, and that's part of it. Because that input side certainly contributes to the overall sustainability and renewable nature of this industry. So I get your question, but I just think it's one that there's some good facts out there about, and we're headed in the right direction. In the state of Iowa, we're pretty focused on soil health and water quality and cover crops and reducing tillage, and those are all things that we're going to continue to work on because they have multiple benefits, not the least of which being the fact that they're a great input to this industry. So, but thanks for the question. I think we're going to have to end here. I want to try to stay on time today. We blew past 11:30 Central on the first MASDA Monday, so we're going to try to deliver on time here. I want to again thank our panelists, TJ, Doug, Gary, thank you so much. We'll make sure that your contact information and more about y'all gets put into our follow-up message here. And when we send it out, I want to once again thank all of our sponsors who you see listed here. thank you again to Dave Tierney with Bear and Dave Flackney with Syngenta for joining us today. And we really do appreciate that. You know, as we log off, you know, last week I mentioned to you we wanted to do a service project together. Again, I wanted to take you all to Meals from the Heartland to do a packaging event, and we're going to do that as the Department of Ag, our leadership team. But I would again encourage you all, as departments of Ag, as organizations that are involved in MASDA and NASDA, would you consider something as a group, going and doing something service related, something food related for our community? And let us know if you do that this summer. We'd love to be able to track that together and talk about what we did together, even though we're apart. Next week, we're going to have a quick discussion on a couple topics, but then we will have some more of our business meeting that we need to have. We'll hear from NASDA staff. We'll have a MASDA meeting in Food Export Midwest as well, Tim Hamilton and the crew. So a little more business in nature next week. We may even have to add a few minutes on to the end to make sure we can get all of that accomplished. But again, thanks for joining us for the second MASDA Monday. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next Monday.
Thank you.